Welcome to Family Law Talk. Family Law Talk. Presented by Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm, PC. Stange Law Firm is a multi-state family law firm. Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Family Law Talk. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is, do you need a lawyer for a non-contested divorce? And this is based on an article on our blog, Indianapolis Divorce Lawyers Blog.com, dated December 8th, 2023. And the title of that article is, Do You Need an Attorney for an Uncontested Divorce? So as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to Indianapolis Divorce Lawyers Blog and read the article on the similar topic. But let's go ahead and jump in. You know, lots of individuals go into a divorce with this idea of having a non-contested or an uncontested divorce. And the hope is that the divorce can be simple, it can be easy, that there can be an agreement on everything in the divorce itself, in that the settlement paper can be pushed through to the judge and the judge will sign off on it, and that neither party needs an attorney. Sometimes I hear individuals want to use the same attorney. So they call and they think, hey, can we both use the same attorney in the divorce? You know, is that possible? And so again, that's the topic here today. We'll go ahead and jump on into it in more detail. But, you know, is a starting point, one of the most important things to remember when you talk about settling a divorce is that it requires an agreement on 100% of everything. So if there's kids involved, then we're talking about resolving child custody, child support, and then dividing marital property and debt, and then having an agreement on spousal support. And we're talking about the entirety of these items. So when you get into child custody, we're talking about legal and physical custody, or whatever the terms are in your jurisdiction. Some states use different terminology to describe that, but then child support, dividing all the property and debt. So you've got to go from the house, the cars, the 401ks, to the investment accounts, to the stock options, to the household items, you name it. I mean, there's got to be an agreement on everything. And then when you get into spousal support, you know, there's either got to be an agreement for it or no spousal support. And then even in cases where there's an agreement, then you get into the amount and then the duration in terms of how long it's going to last. And so where a lot of uncontested divorces end up tripping up is that there's not an agreement on everything. You know, sometimes parties agree on some of it, but there's an area of disagreement. And it might be 10% of the items. It could be 20% of the items. It could be a situation where the parties conceptually agree to joint physical custody, but then when you get into the days of the week that each party's going to get the kids, they don't agree. When you get into summertime, maybe they don't agree. When you get into the holidays, there could be a disagreement. And so, you know, the truth of the matter is for a lot of parties, reaching an agreement on everything can be very difficult for a lot of parties. And obviously divorces happen for different reasons, but sometimes parties get divorced because they don't communicate well. And maybe they have a hard time compromising. And so it could be difficult for a lot of parties to reach an agreement and compromise on a divorce without having an attorney. Oftentimes an attorney can help make the settlement happen, make the agreement happen, simply because the parties aren't able to do it themselves. So look, do you need an attorney for an uncontested divorce? That's the topic. In theory, a party in both parties could go pro se, meaning they don't have an attorney, if they have an agreement and if they're able to complete the paperwork. But in terms of some of the complexities, no matter what state a party's in, there are divorce statutes and requirements that have to be met. There's certain pleadings and court documents that have to be filed, and they have to be drafted in a particular way. States have waiting periods from the time the divorce is filed in terms of when the case could be concluded. Certain states and certain localities require certain court documents, and they have to be completed with accuracy and thoroughness and to the satisfaction of the judge. Judges want to make sure as well that when you get into property division and debt division, that everything is accounted for and that everybody understands the values, that the agreement's not unconscionable, and that there's a valid and fair separation agreement. And so, look, it can be difficult to complete this paperwork, to do it correctly, to meet the requirements in order to get the judge to sign off on an agreement, even if an agreement can be reached. So again, out of the gates, the problem for a lot of people is agreeing on everything. A lot of parties aren't able to agree on everything. Maybe they can agree on much of it, but not everything. But then even if there's an agreement on everything, then filing the right paperwork, making sure it's accurate and completed to the satisfaction of a judge can be a hard thing for a lot of parties that are not lawyers or not paralegals and don't have legal training. I'll give you one metaphor that I have told clients for years, which is this, which is, look, math is not particularly my strongest suit. It wasn't my strongest suit in high school or college. Okay, so follow me on this. Theoretically, trying to get settlement paperwork through and getting it approved by a judge could be like me needing to make 100% on an advanced calculus test, right? For some of you all, you might be very good at calculus and you could do that simply and easy. But for somebody like me, where calculus is challenging, it might be very difficult for me to get this paperwork and complete it accurately and thoroughly to the satisfaction of a judge, because a judge can't give parties legal advice. They can't do that. They just have to make sure items in the paperwork are completed accurately and according to the statutes. And where a lot of parties fall short, even when there is an agreement, is they can't get the paperwork filled out right. Okay, so that's one issue. Another issue with not having an attorney is ensuring that your rights are protected. For most of the listeners here, you're not an attorney. You don't have experience as a paralegal or a legal assistant or in a law office. So how do you even know what's fair? How do you know what is just? And how do you know what you might get if you went to court? And so for a lot of parties, that is the other trick. Not having an attorney can result in one party not getting a fair deal, not getting an agreement that works, not just for the short term, but for the long term. All right, so that would be another issue with not having an attorney. Also, lots of parties where they get confused is they say, well, it's an uncontested divorce, and I've been through this with lots of clients, and I ask them, well, what do you mean by that? And what most people think is, well, look, we both want a divorce, so it's uncontested. And it's like, no, I understand. So you're right, it's technically uncontested or non-contested, but the second hump, which is often the bigger hump, is having an agreement on everything. And so it might be uncontested, but even where it's uncontested, in most jurisdictions, a judge isn't going to divorce the parties till they have an agreement on everything. I mean, in theory, there's some jurisdictions that might allow for bifurcation where they grant the divorce and then defer the disposition of the case. But from my experience, that's very rare in terms of my experience in family law. Also, there can be other things going on in cases. What do you do where one party's been hiding assets or maybe behaving unfairly? In a case where a party doesn't have an attorney, they can be duped on stuff like that. If somebody's got some hidden assets hidden somewhere and they don't disclose it, and then the divorce is pushed through, that could be a problem. The other issue, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, is helping with the negotiations. A divorce attorney can definitely help with the negotiations because, again, a lot of parties do not communicate well. That could be the reason for the divorce. A fair chunk of individuals I've seen try marriage counseling. And even with the help of a counselor, they're not able to resolve their differences. So if they can't resolve their differences that way, it's very hard for a lot of individuals to then negotiate the divorce. So a divorce attorney can definitely help with the divorce itself. So look, do you have to have an attorney for an uncontested or non-contested divorce? No. I mean, it's not a requirement to have one. But at the end of the day, it can be very hard to actually get to the finish line on a divorce and conclude it without an attorney for the reasons I stated above. And that's where an attorney can help, and an attorney can be very useful. Other questions lots of individuals ask on this topic is, how long does it take to get an uncontested divorce done? And again, I would just tell everybody it varies. One of the things you got to keep in mind is there's a waiting period in certain states from the date the divorce is filed to the date the judge will sign off on the paperwork. So it's very important to know the waiting requirements. So speak to a lawyer who's licensed and competent to practice law in your jurisdiction. But I mean, step one is getting past the waiting period, and then step two would be having an agreement and then getting it presented to the judge. And in some jurisdictions, if there's an agreement, it's signed by everybody. It can be submitted by affidavit, and then it's a matter of how long does it take the judge to get to it. Most judges want to review the paperwork, and so sometimes there can be a wait there from the time it's submitted to the time that the judge actually looks at the paperwork and thoroughly analyzes it. And then again, the judge could approve it and sign it or reject it and say that it wasn't completed properly, to use my metaphor before, the math metaphor. The judge could review it and say, no, this paperwork's not done right, I reject this. What's the average cost of an uncontested divorce if an individual chooses to hire an attorney? Well, look, I mean, there's a filing fee in most jurisdictions to get the divorce filed, and then the rate for the lawyer. And if the lawyer's billing hourly, then it's how many hours the attorney logs on the case itself. And certainly the longer it takes, the more the cost, and the less time it takes, the less fees, I should say, it is for an individual on an uncontested divorce. Individuals sometimes ask, is there a requirement that parties be separated before divorce? And again, one of the things I would tell you all is this can vary based on the state you're in. Every state has different laws, different requirements. And then you get in again to the waiting period issue that's out there, and so most states have a waiting period. But again, this can vary based on the state. It could be 30 days, could be 60 days, it could be something different. So speak with a lawyer who's licensed and competent to practice law in your jurisdiction. On the issue of separation, some states out there, do require separation. Some don't. Some states might allow for emotional separation. So if the parties are emotionally separated, that might be good enough. Some states might say that's not good enough. So definitely speak to a lawyer in your jurisdiction. That can really vary in terms of the answer to that question. Another question lots of individuals ask is, what is the fastest way to get a divorce? And again, the fastest way to get a divorce ultimately, in terms of the first hurdle, comes down to, can the parties reach an agreement on all the issues that are out there? The quicker the parties can reach an agreement on property and debt division, child custody, child support, spousal support, the quicker the case can be concluded, and the longer that takes, the longer the case is going to go. And again, the other variables are the waiting periods, and is there a requirement for separation in your jurisdiction, and obviously that can have an impact as well. Okay, so back to the original question in terms of, do you need a lawyer for a non-contested divorce? I mean, technically the answer is no. I mean, the judges in most jurisdictions, at least from my experience, is not going to require you to get in a divorce, although I think most judges would tell you it's a good idea to get a lawyer. You ought to think long and hard about getting a lawyer. But is it a requirement? It's not a requirement, but it is a very good idea. It's very smart for most individuals because, again, it's hard for individuals to even reach a settlement without a lawyer. The legal requirements are out there in terms of the pleadings and the documents. Very hard for most individuals to do that on their own without a lawyer. You want to make sure your rights are protected as well. And then again, you want the agreement to be fair. You want to make sure there's not funny business like hiding of assets and stuff like that. So you don't technically need an attorney, but it's almost always a good idea to get an attorney. And my advice, to any listeners out there is get an attorney. It's worth the money to get an attorney. You've got to live with the consequences of a divorce, not only for the short term, but for the long run. And it's better in the long run to do it. And obviously, any individual out there has lots of choices in terms of attorneys. There's lots of different ways and avenues they can go, from higher priced attorneys to lower priced attorneys to attorneys in the middle to attorneys in big firms to attorneys in small firms. I mean, you name it. But, having said that, that's for any individual to contemplate, think about, and consider. But at the end of the day, getting an attorney, not required, but definitely a good idea in almost every circumstance. So definitely think long and hard about it. All right. Well, that concludes the topic today. Again, as a follow-up to the episode, go on over to IndianapolisDivorceLawyersBlog.com. Check out the article titled, "Do You Need an Attorney for an Uncontested Divorce?" That'll give you more information on this topic. But thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned to our next episode coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Family Law Talk with Kirk Stange. Visit StangeLawFirm.com for more about today's topic or to put Stange Law Firm to work for your family today. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri or Illinois reviews or approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The information you obtained in this podcast is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. You should consult an attorney for advice regarding your individual situation. We invite you to contact us and welcome your calls, letters, and electronic mail. Contacting us does not create an attorney-client relationship. Please do not send any confidential information to us until such time as an attorney-client relationship has been established. Past results afford no guarantee of future results, and every case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Kirk Stange is responsible for the content. Headquarters, Office, 120 South Central Avenue, Suite 450, Clayton, Missouri, 63105. Kirk Stange is licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas.